Undercover boss buys groceries. At his store, shocked when he hears two. Cashiers frame a night worker. Nathan Blake adjusted the beanie lower over his thinning gray hair and zipped up his worn jacket as the automatic doors of Blake's Mart slid open. The cold air of West Haven's midnight hour followed him in. To anyone watching, he looked like just another night shift customer, maybe a gig worker grabbing a late snack. No one noticed him, and that was exactly how he wanted it. For over 2 decades, he had built Blake's Mart from a single 24-hour corner store into a respected chain across 4 states. But for the past year, he'd been pulled deeper into boardrooms, expansion deals, and quarterly projections. Numbers told one story: steady profits, stable margins. But behind those numbers were whispers, complaints from night customers, quiet resignations, missing inventory from the 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift. No one could pinpoint the cause, so Nathan decided to find it himself. He chose West Haven's flagship store, the first Blake's Mart ever opened. He hadn't walked these tiles in 15 months. The floor was clean, the neon open 24/7 sign still flickered, and the rows of snacks and refrigerated drinks stood tall. But as he moved past the coffee station and watched the interactions from the shadowed corner near aisle 3, he could feel it, the emptiness. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was hollow. Something was off. And then he saw him. The man stood behind the counter with a quiet rhythm that felt like a different time. His name tag said Luis, a narrow frame under a faded red vest. His hair, salt and charcoal, was combed neatly to one side. He looked to be in his late 60s, his movements slow but precise, like someone who knew the value of doing things right, even when no one was watching. Luis checked a shipment of milk cartons under the refrigerated shelf, carefully pulling out the expired ones. Not with the speed of youth, but with the steadiness of someone who still believed customers deserved safe food, even at midnight. A young woman entered the store, a toddler bundled in a blanket resting against her shoulder. She moved quickly through the aisles, grabbing formula and a loaf of bread. At the register, her hands shook as she pulled out cash. I'm short, she whispered. Nathan watched from the coffee corner. Luis paused, glanced gently at the child, and then, without a word, slipped a few bills from his own wallet and tapped them onto the counter. "No worries," he said softly. "You get her home warm." The woman hesitated, clearly overwhelmed. "Thank you. I'll come back, I promise." Luis nodded but didn't wait for gratitude. He just finished the transaction, bagged the groceries, and went back to wiping down the counter. The woman left, hugging the bag close. Moments later, 2 younger employees walked in through the back, early arrivals for the morning prep. Chase, with a buzzed haircut and gym bag slung over one shoulder, and Brianna, stylish even in uniform, both in their 20s. They didn't say hello to Luis. Instead, Chase smirked. "Still playing night hero, old man? What's the plan tonight? Save the world $5 at a time?" Brianna laughed as she opened the fridge. "He probably just wants people to like him. No one else talks to him." Luis didn't respond. He kept stacking the receipt rolls quietly. Nathan sipped his bitter coffee slowly. Something twisted in his chest. He didn't know this man, but he recognized that tone, the cruelty that wears a smile, the kind that thrives when management isn't looking, or when it doesn't care. And Nathan hated that he hadn't looked sooner. For the rest of the hour, he watched Luis clean up after customers, realign candy bars along the checkout lane, and fix a loose cap on a cooler with a small roll of electrical tape. Every action said, "This matters. This store matters. These people matter." Nathan finished his cup and refilled it without drawing attention. He stood quietly near the pet aisle, out of view but close enough to hear. Chase leaned over the counter. "You know he sleeps behind the store, right? In that old van?" Brianna rolled her eyes. "I thought that was just a rumor." Chase grinned. "Nah, I saw him once after my shift. Dude climbed in like it was a tent. Probably thinks working here gives him purpose or whatever." They both laughed. Luis just kept working. Nathan didn't say a word. Not yet. But inside, something had shifted. This wasn't just about profit margins or overnight inventory. This was about culture. This was about people. And tonight, he had seen the quietest man in the store carry the most dignity of anyone in the building. Nathan Blake had walked into Blake's Mart to solve a business problem. He'd just found a human one. It was past 2 a.m. when the energy inside Blake's Mart finally thinned to a steady hum. Nathan sat on a bench by the front window, a lukewarm coffee cup in hand, pretending to scroll through his phone. He wasn't there to make purchases. He was watching something far more valuable than the sales numbers printed on paper. Behavior. Luis Alvarez had not slowed. He moved from the coffee station to the snack aisle, quietly correcting the mess left behind by careless customers. Crumpled wrappers, open chip bags, a half-melted ice cream bar shoved behind the energy drinks, all quietly handled with gloved hands and a cloth tucked into his belt loop. No complaining, no theatrics, just doing what needed to be done. When the store camera near aisle 5 flickered and went dark for a moment, Nathan noted it silently. He remembered approving a tech budget last quarter for upgraded surveillance. That camera shouldn't be glitching. That's when Luis stepped outside with a trash bag in one hand, and Nathan followed, pretending to stretch his legs. In the glow of the parking lot lights, he watched Luis gently place the bag in the dumpster, then pause beside the back wall. There, tucked in the shadows, was the van. It wasn't a rumor. Old, battered, with faded paint and one missing hubcap. Curtains drawn from inside using old blankets. On the back window, taped with yellowing adhesive, was a printed shift schedule. Folded, reused, hand-marked with circles. Luis stepped to the passenger side, opened the door, and carefully took out what looked like a metal thermos and a tattered book. He didn't go in, just stood there a minute, breathing in the silence, then walked back in as if nothing had happened. Nathan stood still, his breath fogged in the cold, his jaw clenched. Because now it wasn't just about a man sleeping in his car. It was about what kind of company allowed someone like Luis to be invisible. Back inside, Brianna and Chase were now stocking drinks at the cooler, giggling and whispering between cans. Nathan returned quietly and watched as they laughed while tossing a soda between them like a game of catch. It fell once. Luis walked over immediately to pick it up. "You'll shake it," he said gently, placing it back in the cooler with steady hands. "No one's gonna buy that one now," Brianna sneered. Chase rolled his eyes. "It's 99 cents. Chill out, Captain Careful." Luis said nothing, but Nathan saw the flicker in his eyes, a flash of tiredness, maybe sadness, the kind of look that happens when a man realizes even the smallest things he tries to protect are laughed at. That was when Nathan moved toward the opposite aisle and stood near the register, careful to stay in earshot. A man in his 50s approached with a six-pack and a prepaid phone card. Luis greeted him, scanned the items, and handed over the receipt with his usual quiet warmth. The man dug through his wallet, then cursed under his breath. "Damn, I thought I had enough." "It's okay," Luis replied, barely above a whisper. "Just a few dollars short. I can cover that." Before the man could protest, Luis slid a few bills into the drawer, keyed in a manual override, and nodded. The man left. Luis continued. "The store didn't lose much. The man got what he needed. No harm done, right?" But Nathan caught it. The sharp glance from Brianna, the quick check of the drawer, the whispered words to Chase. "He did it again." Chase grinned. "That's 3 times this week, maybe more." "She won't believe it without proof," Brianna murmured. Chase leaned in, his voice low but clear enough for Nathan to hear. "Then we give her proof. Something she can't ignore. You know what to do." They parted like it was routine. Nathan felt his pulse quicken. That wasn't just gossip. That was the intent. This wasn't a toxic attitude. This was a calculated plan. Luis wasn't just being mocked. He was being targeted. Nathan's hand tightened around his coffee cup. The cup crinkled in his palm. He'd built Blake's Mart to be the kind of place that hired people like Luis. And now those very people were being used as scapegoats by the ones who saw kindness as weakness. He stayed until the clock hit 4 a.m. The city was asleep, but inside this little corner store, the battle lines had quietly been drawn. Nathan walked out without saying a word, but he knew. Tomorrow everything would change, and it would start with one man's dignity being restored. The next night, Nathan didn't head straight to Blake's Mart. Instead, he parked a block away just before 10:30 p.m., engine idling in the dark. From the back seat, he pulled out a brown paper bag containing 2 thermoses of hot coffee and a foil-wrapped sandwich. He didn't know if Luis would accept it, but that wasn't the point. It was time to understand. When the store's closing chime sounded overhead, Nathan waited, watching the side alley like a hawk. At exactly 11:05, Luis emerged through the employee door carrying his backpack and a battered plastic bag. He moved slowly, favoring one leg. His breath showed in the air, visible even in the dim glow of the nearby lamplight. Luis paused by the dumpster as he always did, looked up briefly toward the sky like he was thanking something unseen, then walked toward the far end of the lot. Nathan followed in silence, careful to keep a distance, until Luis rounded the back of the building and unlocked the side door of the rusted green van. It looked worse up close. The side was dented from what might have been a collision years ago. The rear bumper had duct tape on it. The license plate was barely held in place by a single screw. Inside, there were folded cardboard sheets lining the floor, and a blanket tucked over what seemed like milk crates turned into shelving. Nathan stopped a few feet away and spoke softly. "Luis?" The old man turned sharply, surprised. His posture stiffened for a second, a flash of worry in his eyes, until he saw Nathan holding out the paper bag. "I brought coffee," Nathan said gently, "and something to eat." Luis hesitated, then gave a small nod, motioning toward the side of the van. They sat on 2 concrete parking blocks, steam rising between them from the thermos lids. "I've seen you," Nathan said, "not just in the store, but how do you live? What you carry?" Luis looked down at his hands, calloused, dry. He rubbed them together before answering. "I don't need pity." "I didn't bring any." A long pause stretched between them. Then Luis took a sip from the thermos and spoke, his voice low, laced with fatigue and quiet dignity. "My wife, she passed 3 years ago. Stroke came out of nowhere. One minute she was baking bread. The next," his voice caught, but he pushed through it, "she needed care. ICU rehab. I sold our house, cashed what was left of our savings. It still wasn't enough." Nathan listened without interruption. "I didn't want to be a burden to my daughter. She's got kids of her own in Arizona. So I applied for night work, less noise, fewer people. Figured I could rest during the day, park out back, and save up for something stable again." Luis glanced over, half smiling. "But somehow, life just kept getting more expensive than I could keep up with." Nathan swallowed hard. "Why didn't you ask for help?" Luis chuckled softly. "You think pride disappears just because you're poor? I've seen people come in hungry, embarrassed, and I know that feeling. So I help. That's enough for me." "And the others?" "Brianna, Chase, the things they say?" Luis shook his head. "Words don't weigh much when you're used to carrying silence. I just keep my head down, do the work, try to be the man my wife would still recognize." Nathan looked at him, his throat tight. "Do you know they're planning something? A setup?" Louis looked over with tired eyes. "I've felt it, but it's not the first time someone's tried to push me out." He smiled sadly. "And if they succeed, at least I'll know I didn't stoop to their level." Nathan stood then, slow and steady. "They won't succeed," he said. "I promise you that." Louis gave him a long, searching look, and in that moment, though he didn't know who Nathan really was, something in the CEO's voice, quiet certainty, the conviction, made Luis nod. That night, Nathan didn't sleep. He spent hours reviewing store reports, camera logs, and call transcripts from employee complaints that had been dismissed too quickly. By morning, he had a plan. The next shift wouldn't just be another night. It would be the beginning of a reckoning, one that would restore something Blake's Mart had lost, its soul. By the time the streetlights blinked on outside Blake's Mart that evening, Nathan was already in place, seated in the far corner of the store near the back fridge, a hood pulled low over his forehead, glasses fogged just enough to disguise him. His notebook lay flat on the table, unopened. He didn't need to take notes anymore. He needed to witness. Luis arrived as always, 20 minutes early, in his worn jacket, carrying a thermos and a paperback novel that looked like it had been read 100 times. He nodded to the departing day manager, offered a soft "buenas noches," and headed straight to the counter, where he began reviewing the shift checklist without complaint. Then came Chase and Brianna. Not scheduled yet, but they showed up early anyway. Nathan had seen them do this before. They leaned near the candy aisle, talking low and fast, their eyes darting toward Luis like wolves circling an injured deer. Nathan leaned forward slightly, just enough to catch fragments of their voices over the hum of the refrigerators. "You got the receipt printer delay set?" Brianna whispered. "Done. Looks like a system glitch." "That'll buy us time before she checks the mismatch," Chase answered. "And the barcode swap?" "Already in place. Shelf sticker says $2.49, but it scans $5.99. Classic." They grinned. Nathan didn't move. Luis, meanwhile, went about his work as usual, straightening shelves, removing expired yogurts, replacing the lid on the ice bin someone had left open. At one point, he stopped to help a young man who'd knocked over a display of trail mix. He didn't scold him, just knelt down quietly and said, "No worries." Happens. It was close to midnight when it happened. A woman in her late 20s entered the store with a toddler asleep on her shoulder and a basket full of essentials: formula, water, instant oatmeal. She looked tired, worn out, and exactly like the kind of person Luis had always helped. That's because she was. Nathan had arranged for her to come. Her name was Teresa, a single mom working 2 jobs, yes, but also someone who'd agreed to help shine a light on what was happening at night inside his store. All she had to do was act natural, let the transaction play out. As she approached the counter, Luis greeted her with a warm smile. "Long night?" he asked gently. "Always," Teresa whispered. Luis scanned the items carefully. The total came to $32.76. She opened her wallet. I thought I had enough. I'm sorry, Luis, already reaching into his pocket, pulled out a 10 and slid it discreetly across the counter. "Keep the change for next time," he said, almost as if it were a reflex. He didn't see Brianna watching from the end of the aisle, or Chase, who had already slipped behind the second register. They didn't say a word. Not yet. They waited until Teresa left, her whispered "thank you" trailing behind her. Then Chase stepped forward, exaggerated and loud. "Bethany needs to check this now," he called out, waving a transaction slip. "I think we've got another discrepancy." Luis looked up, confused. "What?" Chase shrugged, playing innocent. "I just ran a drawer count. We're short. Again." Brianna chimed in, flipping through her notebook. "It's the 3rd time this month. Always the night shift. Always the same drawer." Luis looked between them, blinking. I haven't touched anything." "No one's accusing anyone," Chase said, his voice all fake sweetness. "But Bethany should know. Protocol, right?" Luis didn't reply. He just lowered his eyes and continued stacking scratch cards into the display tray, the tremble in his hands almost invisible unless you knew to look. Nathan knew. He stood slowly, walked to the refrigerated drinks, pretended to read the label on a bottle of iced tea. But inside he was boiling. They weren't done yet. He could feel it. Half an hour later, Brianna accidentally scanned a price-swapped item. A pack of gum rang up as a premium snack. Luis, catching the mistake, voided the item, but Chase noted it down quietly. Then came the cherry on top. A shelf in the cleaning aisle was missing a barcode tag. Brianna loudly announced it to the store as if it were a scandal. This was right under Luis's section too, wasn't it? "Coincidence," Chase added. Nathan clenched his jaw. They were laying the groundwork, setting the narrative, collecting fake incidents to present to Bethany. And maybe on paper it would look convincing. An aging man, language barrier, multiple little errors. Until you saw what Nathan had seen, until you cared to look closer. He checked his watch. Just a few more hours until the morning shift. And then it would be his turn to speak. At 6:02 a.m., just as the sky began to lighten with a hint of dawn, Bethany arrived. The store's day manager had a reputation for fairness, but also for being firm, especially when it came to money. She walked in holding a clipboard and a half-finished coffee, unaware of the storm that was about to unfold under the fluorescent lights of aisle 4. Chase was already at the register with a report in hand. his shirt suspiciously wrinkle-free for someone claiming to have stayed late. Brianna hovered nearby, glancing between him and Bethany with rehearsed urgency. "Hey, Beth," Chase began, voice laced with concern. "We had another discrepancy last night. $32 short. I did a drawer count myself. It matches the last two incidents exactly." Bethany blinked. "Third time?" "Yeah," Brianna added. "And I hate to say this, but..." She hesitated like an actor hitting a dramatic beat. "It always happens when Luis is working alone." Luis, who had just returned from the back with a restock of bottled water, froze mid-step. His hands tightened on the plastic handles. The bags crinkled under his grip. Bethany turned toward him. "Luis, can we talk in the back for a second?" He nodded silently. Nathan watched the scene unfold from the far end of the store, leaning against the coffee machine. His expression didn't change, but his heart beat harder with each second. He gave it one last minute, enough for the confrontation to begin, and then he moved. In the back room, Bethany was scanning through last night's receipt logs while Chase hovered behind her like a shadow. Luis sat on a folding chair, his expression unreadable. "I'm not saying you stole anything." Bethany was careful, measured. "But this is becoming a pattern. We have to look at everything." Chase added, "We even saw him near the price tag printer yesterday. He might have accidentally changed the wrong labels." Luis looked up. "I was fixing the jam Brianna left. It was blinking red." "You're saying it was her fault?" Chase asked with mock innocence. "I'm not blaming anyone," Luis said quietly. "But I didn't take anything. I helped a customer who couldn't pay, like I've done for 3 years." Just then, the back door creaked open. Nathan Blake stepped in. Not the beanie-wearing man with tired eyes. Not the silent night shopper with a soft walk and blurred face. This time, Nathan looked like who he really was. Pressed shirt, steady gaze, calm, unflinching presence. Chase paled. Brianna stiffened in the hallway just outside. Bethany looked confused. "Can I help you, sir?" "You already have," Nathan said gently, then extended a hand. "I'm Nathan Blake. I founded this company." The silence cracked like ice on concrete. Luis's head turned slowly. He blinked once, then again. "You were here last night," he said softly. Nathan gave a small smile. "And the night before, and the one before that." Bethany's clipboard slipped from her hands and clattered onto the floor. Chase stepped back, mouth slightly open. "I've been observing this store for several nights," Nathan continued. "You might have noticed a few new cameras installed last week. Hidden, yes. With audio." He looked at Bethany. "We had concerns about discrepancies during the night shift. I came to investigate myself." Chase tried to recover. "Then you know, Luis was near the register when money went missing." "I do," Nathan said calmly. "I also know he was putting money in, not taking it out." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small black remote. Pressed a button. In the main store, every screen that usually played muted news or weather flickered to black, then came to life. The footage was unmistakable. Luis is quietly helping customers short on money, placing bills into the register with careful hands. Chase and Brianna are exchanging receipts, swapping price tags, recording fake inventory adjustments, then audio. He's always helping those broke night people. Let's use that. Just swap 2 tags. Make Beth think it's an accident. This time he won't wiggle out of it. Gasps echoed from the few early customers already inside. A staff member outside the break room swore under her breath. Bethany's mouth opened and closed. I had no idea." "I didn't either," Nathan said quietly. "And that's the problem." Chase moved to speak, but Nathan raised a hand. "Don't," he said, voice low but firm. "Security and local police are already on their way. I'm not just firing you, I'm filing charges." Outside the office, the morning crew was gathering and watching. Luis still sat frozen, shoulders tight, eyes flickering between Nathan and the screen. Nathan turned to him. "I owe you more than an apology," he said, "but we'll get to that soon." He looked at the rest of the staff. "This stops today. Not just the theft, but the silence, the cruelty, the idea that doing the right thing makes you weak." Nathan exhaled finally. "This store changes today. because of one man's quiet integrity. And as Chase and Brianna were let out minutes later, hands behind their backs, the employees of Blake's Mart stood not in shock, but in quiet recognition. They knew now, the man they'd overlooked had been the backbone all along. The sliding glass doors of Blake's Mart slowly hissed closed behind the two officers as they escorted Chase and Brianna out in handcuffs. The morning sun, just beginning to pour over West Haven's sleepy streets, hit their faces with a sharp clarity that no fluorescent light ever could. And in that moment, caught between shock and shame, everyone inside the store saw the truth laid bare. Luis Alvarez remained seated in the back room, not because he was unsure of what to do, but because his legs had stopped trusting the ground. His hands, those same hands that bagged groceries with kindness and handled register buttons with precision, trembled slightly on his knees. Nathan sat down beside him. "I know it's a lot," he said gently, not with the authority of a CEO, but with the calm of someone who'd finally seen what mattered. "But you're still here, and I'd like you to stay, Luis." Luis turned his face slightly. "Why?" His voice was barely audible. Nathan blinked. "Because you showed me what I'd forgotten. That trust isn't about contracts, it's about character. You carried this place quietly when no one was looking. I should have been the one to protect that, but I failed." Luis's lips trembled. "You didn't fail. You just weren't here." Nathan didn't look away from that truth. That changes now. A quiet knock on the break room door pulled their attention. Bethany stepped in, clipboard against her chest like a shield, but her eyes for once were soft. "Mr. Blake, the team's gathered outside. They'd like to hear what happens next. I think they need it." So did he. Nathan stood, motioned to Luis, and together they walked out to the main floor. It was strange, Nathan thought, how different the same space could feel in just a few hours. The shelves hadn't moved, the lights hadn't changed, but something in the air had. Like the whole store had exhaled. Employees, night crew, morning crew, stockers, cleaners, stood in a loose circle near aisle 3. Some looked nervous, a few ashamed, but most just looked tired of pretending nothing had been wrong. Nathan cleared his throat. No microphone, no big speech, just a man trying to fix something real. "What happened here," he began, "wasn't just about two people stealing. It was about a culture we let fester. We built a place that was supposed to serve the community, but we forgot to serve each other." He scanned the room, pausing on each face, especially the young ones. "We lost our compass, and the person who reminded us where it should point was him." He placed a hand on Luis's shoulder. The older man shifted awkwardly under the attention, but didn't step back. This man worked every night with dignity and care, while others mocked him behind his back. He paid for customers' meals with his own money. He cleaned up messes others ignored. He did it not for recognition, but because it was right. Silence. Then a voice from the back, soft but clear. "He helped me get home safe once when my car battery died," said a girl from the stocking team. "Didn't even tell anyone. He used to leave extra snacks for the delivery drivers," another added. "Said they were working harder than anyone knew." It rippled through the room. Small truths, small kindnesses, unseen until now. Nathan continued, "We're not punishing people anymore for being good. We're building around them. Starting today, we're launching a complete audit of every Blake's Mart location running night shifts. Every store will have direct access to an anonymous reporting system, and we're increasing overnight wages immediately, because if you carry the weight of the quiet hours, you should be supported." Murmurs of relief, of surprise, then applause. Not loud, but honest. Nathan turned back to Luis. "I've also assigned a regional supervisor to take over the hiring and conduct training at this location while we rebuild our team. But I want one thing to stay consistent, your example, if you're willing." Luis blinked, stunned. "You mean?" "I mean," Nathan said, smiling, "you're not a cashier anymore. You're the night operations advisor for Blake's Mart, starting today. Full benefits, paid housing, everything you should have had all along." Someone near the slushy machine clapped, then another, and then they all did. Not just for Luis, but because in some quiet, powerful way, The store had finally remembered its purpose. Luis said nothing for a long moment. Just stood there, eyes glistening, shoulders straightened. Not out of pride, but from a lifetime of holding burdens silently. "I'm not leaving the night shift," he said softly. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to stay." Luis shook his head. "I want to. Some people walk in at 3 a.m. not because they need groceries, but because they need a little human decency. I can give them that." And that was that. Nathan understood. Better than ever. He didn't need to replace Luis. He needed to build a store worth standing beside him. The next morning, long before the Blake's Mart location officially opened, a sleek black SUV pulled up in front of the West Haven branch. It wasn't there for a product drop-off or to fix faulty lighting. It was there for one man. Luis Alvarez stood just outside the employee entrance, still in his faded navy work jacket, still with a pen tucked neatly into the corner of his name tag. He looked up at the vehicle, unsure. Then the door opened. Nathan Blake stepped out, this time in a clean shirt and blazer, not the disguise of a night shift customer, but the real man behind the Blake's Mart empire. In his hand was a slim folder and a small tarnished key attached to a red ribbon. "I hope you haven't made plans this morning," Nathan said, smiling. Luis blinked. No. I just finished the stock rotation." "Good," Nathan replied, offering the folder, "because I have something I'd like you to see." Inside was a short employment contract, Luis's new role, night operations advisor. It listed health coverage, pension contributions, and a salary 3 times what he'd been earning. Luis read in silence. His thumb trembled slightly as it hovered over the signature line. "I don't know what to say." "You've already said it," Nathan replied. "Every night you chose to keep showing up." Luis looked up. "I've never managed anything before." "You've led by example. That's more than enough." Still, Luis hesitated, not because he doubted the offer, but because men like him weren't used to being seen. Nathan held out the key next. "This is for a 1-bedroom apartment, just 2 blocks away, fully paid. No more van, no more paper insulation, no more pretending to be fine when you're not." Luis didn't take it right away. He just stared at the tiny metal shape resting in the CEO's hand, like it was too heavy to lift. "This isn't charity, Luis. This is gratitude. For the bills you paid with your lunch money, for the shelves you stocked with your aching back, for the people you helped when no one was watching." Nathan stepped closer. "And one more thing. I spoke to your daughter in Seattle." Luis's head snapped up. His eyes, wide with emotion, searched Nathan's face for confirmation. "You what?" "She knows about the van, about the hospital debt, about why you didn't want to move in. She was angry at first, until she understood." Luis shook his head slowly. "I didn't want her to feel responsible." Nathan placed a hand on his shoulder. "She said to tell you this. You are not a burden, you are my father, and you are loved." Luis turned his head, just slightly, as tears welled without warning. He swallowed hard, his chest tightening under the weight of years spent hiding pain beneath a smile. Nathan gave him the moment. No speeches, no cameras, just silence and respect. When Luis finally took the key, it was with both hands, like accepting something sacred. "I'm not used to being seen," he said softly. Nathan smiled. "Then get used to it, because from now on, everyone will know your name." Back inside the store, a small team had gathered. Night staff, morning crew, some vendors who had heard what happened. No formal announcements, just quiet glances, grateful nods. Bethany, the manager, stepped forward and handed Luis a brown paper envelope. "It's from the team," she said. "We pulled together a little something for a new jacket or furniture, whatever you need." Luis looked down, shook his head in disbelief. "You didn't have to." "We wanted to," Bethany replied. "You were always there when we didn't ask." For the first time in a long time, Luis smiled, wide, unguarded. Nathan turned to the team. "Starting today, every Blake's Mart store will begin a new initiative, an emergency relief fund for employees in crisis. We're calling it the Luis Fund." A quiet gasp rolled through the crowd. This man reminded us that compassion doesn't need a job title, it needs action. And we're going to honor that every day. Someone clapped, then another. And soon it wasn't just applause, it was a standing ovation in the most unlikely place, a convenience store just past sunrise. Later that afternoon, as Nathan helped Luis move a box of books into the small apartment, he looked around the humble, sunlit space. "It's not fancy," Nathan said, "but it's warm, and it's yours." Luis stood in the center of the room, silent again. Then he placed a framed photo of his late wife on the windowsill, just above a view of the street where Blake's Mart glowed in the distance. "I think she would have liked this place," he whispered. Nathan nodded. "She'd be proud of you." Luis turned, smiling through wet eyes. "I think, for the first time in a long time, I'm proud of myself too." The room didn't need more words, because dignity, real dignity, doesn't shout. It just stands quietly, and finally it gets to rest. By the end of the week, a ripple had spread across every Blake's Mart store in the state, not through press releases or posters, but through hushed conversations in back rooms, Slack messages between night crews, and a wave of quiet disbelief that started with 5 simple words. They promoted the night cashier. Some thought it was a rumor. Others assumed there was a catch. But by Friday afternoon, the email came down officially, straight from Nathan Blake's desk. All night shift employees will now receive base pay increased by 20% emergency financial assistance via the Lewis Fund mandatory training for daytime staff on ethics and respect. A new hotline for anonymous employee reporting, open 24/7. It wasn't just a policy change, it was a cultural reckoning. At the West Haven branch, things looked almost the same. Shelves were still stocked with instant noodles and protein bars. The fridges still hummed behind energy drinks and milk jugs. But the energy had shifted. Luis Alvarez, now in a clean Navy company jacket with night operations advisor embroidered over the chest, no longer walked with hunched shoulders. He walked with purpose. He still took the graveyard shift by choice, not because he needed the money anymore, but because he knew that's where the forgotten ones came through, the delivery drivers with nowhere to sit for a meal. The single mom is buying diapers after midnight. The teenager was picking up snacks with coins pulled from a shoebox. They weren't just customers to him, they were reminders, and he served them like family. Bethany, the branch manager, watched him from the security monitor and smiled. "He's not working for us anymore," she told a regional rep on the phone. "We're working to deserve him." Outside, a new sign had gone up beside the front entrance. Small, unobtrusive. Most customers passed by without noticing it, but those who did stop for a moment longer. It read, "This store is part of the Luis promise. We don't ask how you got here. We just make sure you're treated with dignity." Inside, the store was quiet. Just past 2 a.m., only a few stragglers wandered the aisles. Luis stood behind the register, wiping it clean for the 3rd time. A teenage boy approached, hoodie zipped up, holding a pack of ramen and a sports drink. He handed over a few crumpled bills, then hesitated, searching his pockets. Luis saw the panic in his eyes. The kid was short, but he didn't speak. He just placed the items gently on the counter. Luis reached into his own pocket, quiet, simple, and slid $2 into the register before scanning anything. "No worries," he said, handing over the bag. "Next time, you'll help someone else." The boy looked up, confused. "Why?" Luis gave a soft smile. "Because someone once did the same for me." The door chimed behind him as the boy left, and in that moment, the whole story had come full circle. From the man who had once been invisible, to the man who now made others feel seen. From the van parked behind the store, to a home filled with light and second chances. From a culture that turned its back on the night shift, to a company that finally remembered its soul. Nathan Blake returned once more that night, not in disguise, but with quiet shoes and no entourage. He didn't need a title. He just wanted to watch the store breathe. As he stood in the back near the coffee machine, he saw Luis offer a blanket to a delivery driver who had spilled coffee on himself. Saw him help an elderly woman find sugar-free cereal. Saw him pick up gum wrappers from the floor, not because anyone asked, but because it mattered. Nathan exhaled slowly, and in that breath he realized, leadership isn't about commanding, it's about noticing, and the ones who do it best rarely have the spotlight. but they lead anyway. Because dignity starts when no one's looking. And thanks to one man who never asked for praise, an entire company had remembered who it was supposed to be. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a legacy. Sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest truths. Luis Alvarez didn't fight for recognition. He just showed up, with kindness, with dignity, and with a heart that never kept score. And in the end, his silence changed the system. Not with power, but with presence. Because true leadership isn't always at the top. Sometimes it's behind the counter at 2 a.m., quietly reminding the world what integrity looks like. If this story moved you, share it. Let more people know that quiet goodness matters, and subscribe to our channel for more true stories of dignity, justice, and hope. Because one good person really can change everything.